Hey everyone, I'm Lily, and welcome back to Lily's Viking adventure. Tonight's story comes from the darker corners of Celtic legend, part of our Chilloween series, where tonight we explore ancient battlefield hauntings and the restless spirits that still walk the earth where men once fought and fell. Before we begin, please take a second to bonk that like button and leave a comment below. Every little bit helps right now. We're working hard to get remonetized on YouTube, and to do that, we need to reach 4,000 watch hours. So if you can, please keep the video running. Every minute of watch time truly helps keep this channel alive. Also, I found out that only about 10% of returning viewers are actually subscribed. So if you're one of the 90% who come back for these historical deep dives, but haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please do. It helps us tremendously with the algorithm, and it lets YouTube know that people still care about long-form, story-driven history content. Now settle in, grab something warm to drink, and let's step into the ancient Greek story of the Battle of Marathon and the haunted mists of Ireland, where the dead don't sleep and the Bánánach still drift above the blood-soaked fields. The Battle of Marathon. The plain of Marathon lies still beneath the Greek sun, its golden grasses rippling in the wind like the ghosts of the men who once stood there. Today it is quiet, just the hum of bees and the whisper of the sea. But for the ancients, it was said that when the moon was high and the night was clear, you could still hear the battle rage. Horses' hooves pounded unseen across the fields. The clash of bronze on bronze rang out from the darkness, and voices of the dead shouted their war cries, echoing from no mortal throat. Even centuries later, travelers and shepherds avoided the plain after dusk, for the land itself seemed alive with memory and death. The Battle of Marathon was fought in 490 BCE, when the might of Persia came to crush the fragile freedom of Athens. King Darius had sent his vast army across the Aegean, intending to punish the Greeks for their defiance. The Persians landed in the Bay of Marathon, their numbers beyond counting, their banners heavy with gold and fire. Against them stood the Athenians, farmers, craftsmen, and hoplites, no more than 10,000 men in all, with a few hundred Plataeans at their side. Their commander, Miltiades, knew the odds were hopeless, yet on that morning, under a pale dawn that painted the plain in blood-coloured light, they made ready to fight for their city and the memory of their ancestors. The ancient historian Herodotus wrote that the Greeks charged the barbarians at a run, a mad and desperate act. The Persians, thinking the Athenians insane to attack without cavalry or archers, stood stunned as the phalanx advanced, shields locked, spears bristling. Then came the crash of metal and flesh, the thunder of men colliding, and the cries that tore through the air like blades. Dust rose in thick clouds, the screams of the dying mingled with the roar of victory and despair. It was said the gods themselves watched that day. Some swore they saw the ghostly figure of the hero Theseus among the Athenians, striking down Persians with a shining spear. Others whispered of Pan, half goat, half man, appearing in the mountain shadows, his shrill laughter driving the invaders to panic. When the fighting ended, the plain was a carpet of corpses. Herodotus claimed that 6,400 Persians lay dead, while only 192 Athenians had fallen. The survivors gathered their dead and built a great mound of earth above them, a tumulus that still stands today. They buried their comrades with honors and marked their names upon a stone, a testament to those who had given their lives for the freedom of Greece. Yet the soil beneath that mound never truly cooled. The people of Marathon spoke in whispers of strange things that stirred there after nightfall. Pausanias, writing nearly 6 centuries later, recorded what locals swore they had seen and heard. At night, he wrote, "One may hear the sound of men fighting and horses neighing, yet if one goes nearer, all is silent, and no man is to be seen." To the people of the region, these were not mere stories, they were warnings. The dead, they said, had not gone quietly to Hades. They lingered, bound to the place where their blood had soaked into the ground. Some thought the spirits fought on eternally, replaying their moment of triumph and terror. Others believed they rose in defense of the field whenever it was disturbed. More than one traveler claimed to have seen the glimmer of bronze in the moonlight, a phantom shield, a helmet gleaming faintly, vanishing when approached. One old tale tells of a shepherd who crossed the plain at midnight to retrieve a lost lamb. He saw the fog rolling low across the field, and within it, shapes moved, men with spears, marching silently. He thought they were soldiers training, until one turned and he saw that its face was a hollow mask, eyes like dark pits. The shepherd fled, but when he reached the village, his hair had turned white as bone. Another legend spoke of a weary traveller who camped near the tumulus and awoke to find himself surrounded by figures in ancient armour, staring down at him with pale, unblinking eyes. When he screamed, they vanished like smoke. Scholars of the later ages, skeptical of spirits, said that what men heard at Marathon were tricks of the wind or the cry of night birds over the marshes. But those who lived closest to the plain knew better. They said the air itself felt heavier there, as if weighted with something unseen. Horses refused to cross it. Dogs whimpered and would not go near the mound. The soil, they claimed, sometimes bled rust-coloured water after heavy rain. Perhaps iron, perhaps something older. Even the city of Athens seemed haunted by the victory. Miltiades, hailed as the saviour of Greece, soon fell from grace. Within a few years he was imprisoned and died in disgrace, as though cursed by the spirits of the slain. The Athenians celebrated Marathon as a moment of divine favour, but their poets often spoke of it in darker tones. Aeschylus, who fought in the battle himself, later wrote that a god's breath moved among the spears that day, suggesting something not wholly mortal guided the carnage. Perhaps victory had come at a cost no one yet understood. In the centuries that followed, the battlefield changed little. The mound of the Athenian dead remained a sacred place. Offerings were left there. Honey, oil, small cups of wine to appease the restless souls. Roman travellers brought wreaths, and even in the Christian era, candles were sometimes lit on the hill at night. Yet still the stories persisted. A Byzantine chronicler in the 10th century wrote of phantoms of armed men seen marching across the plain, and a monk who claimed to have heard the cry of the dying echo through the reeds by the sea. Some believed the haunting was not one of torment, but of guardianship. The spirits, they said, stood watch over Greece itself, eternal sentinels who would rise again if the land were threatened. When the Persians returned a decade later, at Thermopylae and Salamis, men whispered that the shades of Marathon had gone before them, unseen allies in the storm, but others feared that no ghost could rest easy after such slaughter. The battlefield was a wound that never healed, a scar upon the earth that even time could not erase. Modern archaeologists have found arrowheads buried deep in the soil, bronze fragments of armour, and bones darkened by age. Each discovery seems to breathe life into the old legends. Tourists who visit the site speak of an uncanny stillness, a silence that feels too complete. Some describe hearing faint drumming, or catching the scent of smoke on air where there is no fire. On certain nights, when the sky is clear and the sea wind carries the distant roar of waves, a few claim they can hear men shouting in the distance, the same voices that Pausanias recorded nearly 2,000 years ago. No historian can prove that the ghosts of Marathon walk still, but even the skeptical find it hard to deny the atmosphere of the place. The tumulus rises from the plain like a sleeping giant, its grassy slopes lit by the moon, and the darkness around it hums with unseen life. The Athenians who built it believed that memory itself could grant immortality, that to be remembered was to live forever. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps the victory they won was too great, too fierce to fade. And so, when the night wind sighs across the field and the reeds whisper in the marsh, those who listen carefully may still hear the battle rage again, the clash of shields, the neigh of unseen horses, and the dying cry of men whose courage bound them to this place for all eternity. The Battle of Bánánach. Under the grey skies of ancient Ireland, where the mist moves like a living thing across the hills, there are places where the grass will not grow straight. The earth there is soft, waterlogged and red beneath the roots. They say that is where the Bánánach walk, spectral women of the battlefield, born from death's breath and bound to the cries of the dying. Long before the church bells rang across Ireland, long before ink or stone recorded its stories, warriors swore they saw pale figures drifting above the fallen, feeding not on flesh, but on the last heat of life that escaped from open mouths. The tales say they were as old as war itself. When men took up spears, the Bánánach came to watch. Some claimed they were the daughters of the Morrigan, the dark goddess who chose who would die. Others whispered they were older still, spirits of the land, shaped by blood spilled upon it. The old Irish texts call them Bánánach ar, spectres that haunt the plain of battle. In the Táin Bó Cúailnge, the epic of Chilloween, they are mentioned in the same breath as the Bánánach and Aithachanach, phantoms that shriek in the air above fighting men. They were the breath between life and death, the wind that carried a warrior's last shout away into silence. When two great hosts met upon the plain, the air was said to thicken before the first spear was thrown. Cattle lowed in fear, and birds vanished from the sky. Then, as the first men fell, the Bánánach appeared, white forms twisting like smoke above the carnage. To look upon them was to know one's doom. They had the shape of women, but their faces were pale and hollow, their hair black as peat water, their eyes pools of darkness that reflected nothing. They made no sound of their own, yet the wind around them screamed. The warriors who lived through such battles said they felt their gaze upon them even as they struck the killing blow, as if each soul taken drew another spirit closer. One of the oldest legends comes from the Battle of Mag Tuired, where the Tuatha De Danann fought the Fomorians, gods and monsters locked in a war for Ireland's soul. When the Fomorians fell, their blood soaked into the ground, and from that earth rose a mist the colour of moonlight. Within it moved the Bánánach, dancing through the heaps of corpses. They did not mourn, they rejoiced. The dead were their feast. As the poet later wrote, they drank of the breath and the heat of the fallen, and the plain was silent, but for the sighing of ghosts. Another story tells of the warrior Fergus MacLeity, who rode through a battlefield after the fight was done. He saw what he thought were women bending over the bodies, keening softly. Thinking them widows or wives come to claim the dead, he approached. but when he drew near, he saw their faces. Bloodless, sharp-toothed smiles glimmering in the dark, and their eyes glowed with a cold light. They turned toward him and began to laugh, a sound like steel tearing cloth. He fled in terror, and by the time he reached his home, his hair had turned as white as snow. He spoke of them only once more before his death. They were not women, but the night made flesh. The Celts believed the battlefield was not merely a place of slaughter, but a crossroads of worlds. There, the living and the dead shared the same ground for a moment too long. It was said the Bánánach came not only to feed but to guide, gathering souls to the shadowed realms beyond. The Liber Gabala Erin, the Book of Invasions, mentions beings of air and gloom who move with the hosts of battle. To the Druids, such beings were neither evil nor good. They were part of the natural order, the unseen balance that war disturbed. Death drew them as light draws moths. There were rituals to keep them away. Before dawn on the day of a battle, some chieftains offered a black ram to the goddess of war. Its throat cut so the blood could soak into the ground before any man's was shed. Better the beast than the brave, one old proverb said. Yet others sought to summon them. There are fragments of invocations carved on Ogham stones near ancient fort sites. Pleas for the Bánánach to grant victory by filling the enemy with terror. Those who called them in this way were marked. Even if they won the battle, they often died soon after, their dreams filled with whispering voices that called them by name. In the oral tales passed down through centuries, the Bánánach never disappeared. The people said they roamed the boglands, the old battle sites where rusted swords still sleep beneath the mud. Travelers at night would sometimes hear laughter drifting from the mist, or see shapes moving through the fog that were too tall, too thin, to be human. Farmers ploughing near ancient cairns found their oxen stopped dead, refusing to move forward, eyes rolling white. In one parish, the locals swore that during storms they could hear the old battles being fought again, the clatter of shields and the shriek of women in the wind. Even the Christian monks who wrote down the pagan myths could not erase the Bánánach completely. In the margins of a 9th century manuscript from Clonmacnoise, a scribe wrote, "Let no man wonder where the old kings fought, for the air there is thick with demons of the field." The word he used, Bana in the old tongue, suggests he still thought of them as the same spirits the Druids once feared. Perhaps he only changed their names to fit a new faith. Modern scholars argue about what the Bánánach truly were. Some see them as a poetic metaphor for the madness of war, others as personifications of plague or the consuming fogs that rolled in after heavy slaughter. But even now, in Ireland's quiet valleys, the locals speak of cursed places where grass refuses to grow straight, and the air feels colder than it should. The archaeologists call them ancient battle sites. The old people call them fields of the white ones. A traveller in the 17th century, one Richard Head, wrote of crossing such a place on a journey through Connaught. He described it as a moor most melancholic, where the air was thick and the wind made a sound like weeping. His guide refused to pass through it at night. "The ghosts walk there," he said. "The women who take the last breath." Head laughed, but he recorded that when they camped on its edge, they heard cries from the darkness that no man could explain. His horse bolted before dawn, found later trembling and foaming at the mouth. In folklore, the Bánánach were not content to remain in the distant past. Some said they appeared on later fields, Clontarf for instance, where Brian Boru fell in 1014. Eyewitnesses spoke of grey women with eyes like embers drifting through the smoke after the battle. Their presence was taken as a sign that the gods of Old Ireland still claimed their due. A chronicler wrote, "The Danes fled from the field, but they were pursued by the women of the air, and their cries were heard long after the living were silent." To the Irish imagination, war and haunting have always been inseparable. The land remembers. Stones hold echoes. The Bánánach are not ghosts in the Christian sense. They are embodiments of the memory of violence born each time blood touches the earth. When you walk the bog roads at dusk and the fog curls low, you may think it's only the wind brushing your cheek, but the old stories say that's how they find you. By scent, by breath, by the faint tremor of fear that stirs the soul like a signal. They do not speak, for they have no need. The air itself becomes their voice. An old poem, preserved in fragment, warns travellers, "Go not by the red bog when the moon is white, for the women of battle ride the mist that night. They breathe in the living, they breathe out the dead, and the reeds sing low where their feet have tread." Today, historians might dismiss such verses as relics of superstition, but the land keeps its own memory. On the plains where ancient armies clashed, even now the wind carries strange notes. Cameras malfunction, compasses spin, and those who linger too long report seeing pale figures where no one should be. They vanish when approached, leaving only the faint smell of rain and iron. Ireland is full of ghosts, but none so old as these. They are not tethered to single graves or names. They are the collective breath of centuries of battle, the echo of courage and terror fused together. The Bánánach do not rest, because war never truly ends. It only sleeps, and so they wait in the hollows of forgotten fields, their long fingers brushing the grass, listening for the sound of men shouting, the metallic cry of weapons meeting again. If you ever find yourself in the west of Ireland, on a foggy plain where the wind feels colder than it should, take heed. Do not whistle, and do not speak the names of the dead. The Bánánach hear such things, and they are drawn to them. And if you should see something pale moving through the mist, do not look too closely. Some say they appear beautiful for an instant. A face familiar, a voice calling softly, but that is only the trap. They feed on those who cannot look away. For the Bánánach do not merely haunt the battlefield. They carry it with them, forever. Across the old world, the ground remembers these stories of ancient hauntings associated with places of great violence and mass death. Where men once clashed in these brutal wars that soaked the earth with blood, the silence that follows is never complete. Wind moving through the grass sounds too much like a whisper. The cry of a night bird echoes like a scream. Historians may write of victory and defeat, but those who have stood upon the sites of ancient battles will tell you something else. That the field itself is not empty. It breathes, it listens, it waits. Haunted battlefields appear in nearly every civilization's lore. From the stony ridges of Greece to the misted valleys of Britain, from the deserts of Persia to the frozen north, people have long believed that death in war leaves a scar the world cannot heal. The Romans called such places loci damnati, the damned places where restless shades gathered. The Norse spoke of the Draugr, corpses that refused to lie still, guarding the sites of slaughter with hollow eyes. In medieval chronicles, there are accounts of spectral armies seen marching silently across the hills, replaying their final charge again and again, as if caught in an eternal storm. The pattern is ancient and familiar. Where great suffering has occurred, Stories of hauntings take root. When thousands die in one place, the veil between the living and the dead feels thinner. The survivors cannot help but sense that the earth has absorbed something it cannot release. Long after the living are gone, the land itself seems to remember what happened there. There is something deeply human in the idea that battlefields remember. The stories were not always meant to terrify. Sometimes they were a kind of reverence. The ancients feared the spirits of those denied proper burial, and they honored the dead with rites to keep them at peace. The haunting, in many cases, was a warning that no victory comes without consequence, and that those who fall in violence never truly leave. Not every haunting was meant as punishment. Some ghosts were guardians. The Romans told of the spirit of Decius Mus, who sacrificed himself by charging the enemy and was seen afterward standing watch over his legion's camp. In Japan, the ghosts of samurai were believed to protect sacred ground from intruders. Even in Christian Europe, soldiers claimed to see spectral knights who appeared to lead lost travelers to safety. But the line between guardian and tormentor is thin, and the same phantom that shields one man might terrify another. Scholars who study folklore note that battlefield hauntings often serve as a collective memory, a way for communities to keep the past alive. A haunting, in that sense, is a story that refuses to end. When people gather around fires and whisper that they heard the clash of armor in the distance, they are not only describing fear, they are preserving history in the only way they can. The ghosts ensure the war is never truly forgotten. In older times, entire landscapes were shaped by these memories. Trees that grew near battlefields were believed to absorb the souls of the dead. Stones stained by blood were left undisturbed, for to move them was to invite misfortune. Shepherds would avoid cutting paths across old war sites, and travelers left offerings: bread, milk, coins, so the spirits would let them pass unharmed. In some parts of Eastern Europe, it was said that the dew that settled on a battlefield at dawn was the sweat of the restless dead, and that drinking it would drive a man mad. There are even accounts of phantom armies appearing far from the sites where they died. Roman historians wrote of a host of shadows seen fighting in the sky, above battles yet to begin, a dark omen of what was to come. In the Norse sagas, seers spoke of hearing the battle song of the unseen, a distant drumming that foretold slaughter. Centuries later, in medieval chronicles, people described watching columns of ghostly soldiers marching across the clouds. War carried beyond the grave, spilling into the heavens. What connects all these stories is not proof of ghosts, but the feeling that war leaves an imprint no eye can see. When men die violently, their energy lingers. The places where they fell become charged with memory. Even those who do not believe in spirits can feel it. A subtle pressure in the air, a heaviness that tightens the chest. Walk across an old battlefield, and you may notice how the birds fall silent, how the wind seems to pause. It's as though the land is listening to you, waiting for you to listen back. Writers have tried to explain this for centuries. The Roman poet Lucan once wrote, "The earth drinks the blood of heroes, and the earth remembers." A medieval chronicler phrased it differently. "The fields know the sound of death, and they repeat it to the wind." Even modern soldiers, hardened by war, speak of feeling watched when returning to sites of battle. They sense the eyes of those who didn't make it home. Perhaps it is guilt that creates the ghosts. Sometimes it is the human refusal to accept silence after so much noise. When thousands cry out in terror and pain, it feels impossible that such voices could simply vanish. The imagination fills the gaps with echoes, and those echoes become stories. Over time, the stories grow bones and faces. They become the spectral armies of legend. Yet there are moments that defy even skepticism. In more than one place, witnesses separated by centuries have described the same sights, the same lights, the same sounds, the same cold presence that settles over the field as night falls. Coincidence, perhaps? Or maybe the land itself truly does remember. If you ever find yourself walking across such a place, an old plain or a grassy hill where something terrible once happened, try standing still. Listen to the air. The past might be quiet, but it is never empty. You might hear the faint clatter of unseen armor, or the echo of hooves moving through the dark. You might feel the air grow colder, as if the night were drawing close to you. Curious. Don't be afraid. These are the oldest witnesses in the world. The memory of battle made sound. The ancients were right about one thing. What is spilled into the earth never truly disappears. The ghosts of battle are not only spirits, they are the shadow of memory itself. They walk beside us, talking through the sound of the grass, waiting to remind anyone who will listen that victories in war are bought with something that never stops echoing. And so, wherever soldiers have stood and fallen, the ground keeps its secrets. But there is a dark story to be told. Call it imagination, or call it haunting. But if you listen closely enough to the stillness of such a place, you will understand. War leaves more behind than bones. It leaves a presence, unseen but undeniable, and the earth will carry it until the end of time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to check the description below for sources, historical references, and links to our store, Viking Adventure Gifts. We've got over 2,300 unique historical and Viking-inspired gifts you won't find anywhere else. Perfect for holiday shopping or for anyone who loves a touch of the ancient and the eerie. Every purchase from our shop helps directly support this channel and keeps projects like Chilloween alive. Thank you all so much for watching, for your time, and for being part of this growing community of history lovers. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, the past never really sleeps. Much love, Lilly, from Lilly's Viking Adventure.